you for the excessive profiling of me. Actually, when you profile a person very excessively to an audience, he has to measure up to the audience expectations. You have raised the audience expectation bar to such an extent that I will have to now work to how to measure up to their expectations in respect of not only the topic but also the questions which are being posed by Dr. Tyagi, which are very important and significant and critical, and also not so easy to answer. So, with this preface, I would like to first tell you why I felt that the topic should be post-COVID world and India. This is very important because there was a time when, me included, we were focusing more on India, in a sense, even exclusively on India, because our system was focusing almost exclusively on the world. That was the time when we started the Swadeshi Jagran Manch under Muralidhar's leadership. That our mind had got externalized at the time. We were looking to the world for everything. 1/6 of humanity cannot rest on the world, cannot be dependent on the world. And so we need to create an India-centric approach, that we have to look at ourselves. That was the starting point, and we had to give excessive Indian orientation as an antidote to the excessive global orientation which was taking place in 1990s. And there is a huge difference between the world in 1990 and the world today, and India in 1990 and India today. It's very important. Unless we understand the paradigm shift which has taken place both in the world and in India, we will not be able to understand why this topic and how this topic is not only relevant, but changes the Indian agenda itself. See, in 1990, the world was US-centric. In fact, the European nations were just the satellites of US. And the world was virtually dependent on the US. And China was its powerful ally. I will trace how China emerged as the powerful ally of the West. And it did not happen only by personal choice, it happened because of the global and geopolitical compulsions, in which a dictatorship is always able to play its cards better than democracy. Democracy is an investment to not only prevent dictatorship, but to create a culture of democracy. It takes time. So, China was a very powerful ally. How it emerged, that we will see later. Look at India. It was a pushover at that time. In fact, it was non-existent before 1990. The Prime Minister of India landed in America. The news item may not appear in a newspaper at all, or it may be in 7th or 8th page or something like that. That was the status of India. It was no player. India emerged as a player because our psychology was not to become a player, much less to become a power. And that I will go into later as to how our psychology was inverted. And today, what is the change? At that time, India needed the world. India was psychologically dependent on the world. This is 1990. Now, if you look at the world, you cannot say this world is centered on America today. America is one of the important countries. I'm not denying the fact. But it is not dependent or centered on America. Even the Atlantic Alliance, where the Western democracies were led by America, is no more that strong, cohesive America-led alliance. In fact, that is one of the factors. This transatlantic alliance, how it is going to behave in the post-COVID world, is one of the factors that will shape not only the world, but also the American leadership. So, today, America is psychologically the ally of India, strategically the ally of India. To what extent we can transform it into an economic alliance, that we have to see, and that will be one of the challenges in the post-COVID period. Look at India. India, which was never a player, became a player, and it has become a power player. Now I must stop and explain how India never had the concept of power because of the wrong interpretation of the Kalinga War, in which Ashoka gave up the war. And Ashokan symbol became the symbol of India. And the Indian freedom movement, which had come out of the non-violence model, it transformed the freedom movement values into not only Indian statecraft, it also transmuted it into India's defense policies, to the extent that the first Prime Minister said there was no need for an army. When the British general who was heading the Indian command forces met the Prime Minister and asked him immediately after he took over, what is the defense policy? He said, there is no need for an army. We can have police, that is sufficient for us. This was the psychology. We are a non-violent country. And within 2 months, the Prime Minister was taught as to how an army is needed by an adversary, Pakistan. And then in 1962, the same thing happened. That we needed an army to defend India itself was not in the thought horizon of the Indian state and polity. This factor is because of the wrong interpretation of Ashoka. Because Ashoka was a victor who gave up the war. India faced multifarious civilizational and political retreats and defeat. So, a defeated Ashoka, having given up war, would never have become a hero. He became a hero because he was a victor. And he gave up the war, but did not disband the army. He used the army to crush all militant tendencies to sustain power. So Ashoka was not minus power. Ashoka was plus power, a brutal power that became a benevolent power because of the Kalinga War. And the message that we missed out, it's very important our intellectuals must imbibe this, because this is one of the areas of my research for the last 30 years, as to what is the psyche of India towards power, within, outside. And outside world is dominated by power. The grammar of power drives the world. Whether it is economic relationship or cultural relationship or political relationship, everything is dependent on the grammar of power. And India lost the sense of power. And I am not talking the will to power which is sourced in Nazism. Actually, the strategic world draws inspiration from the Nazi concept of Nietzsche's concept of will to power, which is not our idea, can never be our idea. But we had our sense of power, for which you have to see what happened in Bhagavad Gita. You look at what Arjuna felt before the Kurukshetra war, Ashoka felt after the Kalinga war. What all Arjuna said and cried before waging the war, Ashoka said and cried after the war. But Krishna actually educated him on the need for war as an exception and prepared Arjuna for the war. But when Ashoka gave up the war, the confusion of Ashoka before the Kalinga war became the confusion of Kurukshetra war, became the mindset of Ashoka after the Kalinga War, and that became the mindset of India. So India hated war, it hated violence, it hated power, it hated army, but the world was centered on all this. This was the psychological mismatch between India and the world when India attained independence, and India never played a power game so much that when the latest Wilson Institute document shows, when India was asked to become the Security Council member, the Indian government said, no, it is China which should be the right candidate, not us. It is because you had no sense of power, you were no player in your mind. So we gave Hanumanji's mace in the hands of an enemy. And you know what kind of problems, difficulties today we face because China is there in our place. China would have come much later, of course. But that was the psychology. With research, it was only in 1998 India decided to join the power play when it excluded the poker and atom bomb. Till then, India was taken as a very soft, good, noble country, and the respect it deserved was only for them. A soft power not backed by strong power, hard power, never had any meaning in the world, because the world, as I will say, how the grammar of the world shifted and where it is going and where we are there. Today, India, having become a power player in 1998 and has been recognized as such, is now a global power player, and the world needs India as much as, and perhaps more than India needs the world. So there is a change in the perception and paradigm. Without this psychological understanding, intellectual understanding, philosophical understanding of India, where it was and where it is today, the world where it was and where it is today, even the very title, India and the world in the context of the post-COVID world order, which cannot be fathomed. Post-Cold War order will change once and for all. This is what everybody says. We are not yet post-COVID. You must understand that we are not prognosticating. We are perceiving. We are guessing. The whole world is guessing. The man who formulated the post-world Cold War order, Henry Kissinger, wrote a 628-word article in his blog and said there will be a world order which has nothing to do with the world order today. And he didn't say what it will be, where it will be, what will be its character, who will be the players, but one thing he said, it will change forever. You must understand, these are all not very ordinary words of ordinary people. They were the authors, they were the movers, they were the shakers, they were the mind which shaped the current world order. And so we must understand that we are in it is more than paradigm shift, because language admits of only what it knows. But it is beyond the capacity of any language to grasp the change that is taking place in the world. And whether there will be a world order or world disorder, even this is not known. Francis Fukuyama says the liberal world may yield place to a barbaric world. This is the bandwidth of the change that will take place in the world. But one thing, the world is going to change once and for all, because the trust among nations, whether it was actual or pretended, has once and for all collapsed. It has to be rebuilt between nations on more durable basis. Durability is lost in the last 200 years in the civilization, because colonialism lasted for 200 years. Everybody thought it would last forever. Mercantile capitalism lasted for 100 years. Everybody thought it would last forever. Communism lasted for 50 years. Everybody thought it would last forever. Globalization lasted for 25 years. Everybody was told it will last forever. What I am mentioning is the shelf life of ideas are crashing, because none of these ideas are rested on durable formulations, durable factors. Human life has to be measured not in terms of the next elections. That is what the democratic world, which led the world, has made the world so short-sighted. So it is difficult for the world to have a 30-year. What should happen to the next generation is not in the grasp of a democratic nation, but it is very much in the grasp of a dictatorship. This is the difference. Why China made a difference is because they said 30 years later, this is what we will do. 30 years later, what we will do, the American think tanks were doing, but no American president could do because he was only looking at the next elections. So this democratic shortfall was a very important factor which has shaken the world. That is why Central and East European nations are moving away from free democratic paradigm to civilizational paradigm, because democratic paradigm doesn't have durability, no consistency. So all these we have to keep in mind, because we are a democratic nation, but we are not the same democracy. That's what I'm going to tell you. The Cold War order was based on ideology. It was between free nations and communist nations, the battle. And America overplayed its card in terms of trying to control the world from a distance. You can never control the world from a distance. There can be no remote control of the world. They wanted to do it in Korea first, they succeeded. They wanted to do it in Vietnam, they failed. And the American economy began crashing because American gold stocks were depleting to defend the dollar. So Americans had to work out a strategic retreat from the Cold War divide, and they had to break the communist alliance, for which they bribed China, which was a serious problem. Between 1957 and 61, nearly 40 million Chinese died of hunger. And they had to do something, otherwise China would be lost. China desperately needed some help. And America desperately needed China to break the communist alliance. This is what made Henry Kissinger formulate that ultimately the world will be run by the concept of balance of power, sans principles. This is important. He made it very plain. There can be no principle to world order. It can only be based on convenience. It will be based on balance of power. It will be determined by strategies. We don't, when we discuss, we take the world as static, as something stable. No. Kissinger said the world can never be stable. It will always be a floating world, in which he said we have to maintain the balance of power, for which we have to break the communist alliance, which they did successfully, and they faced the worst humiliating defeat when Saigon fell, but they had a retreat from the Cold War, and they broke the communist alliance and emerged as the superpower by the fall of communism. And that gave a psychological advantage. And Francis Fukuyama said the Western liberal democracy and market economy has won final victory over the rest, and the rest will have to accept the West as the best and move forward. This was the principle. The short-sighted proclamation of the victory of the West over the rest is one of the factors which led America and the West to accommodate Marxist China in market economy. These two are oxymoron. You cannot have market economy in a Marxist polity. But China, America, in its enthusiasm and in order to pay the debt of gratitude, and also the US multinationals and the Western multinationals felt that the benevolent laws of the West will not allow them to build economic power. And you know the kind of labor laws that China passed, nobody can pass other than dictatorship. This is what the Human Rights Watch of 2002 says, that such a law is unimaginable in any of the democratic countries. It's not possible in. So with this kind of Marxist polity allowed to play in market economy, China secured an advantage which the West never thought it would. They thought China's population as the market, but they never thought the non-transparent Marxist polity will destroy the global market economy. And it happened. And in the process, geopolitics has shifted so much that America was virtually willing to hand over Taiwan on a platter, but for the US Congress intervening, it would have happened. Taiwan survived after Jimmy Carter was willing to do it. It is only the US Congress which saved it by the Taiwan Act. And with the result, one of the most important sources of technology for both China and US is not in the hands of China. So this was the extent to which America was willing to accommodate. And in 1990s, Marxist China being accepted into the world market economy, non-transparent China being in the transparent world market, which is an oxymoron, hit America after 2008. Till 2008, nobody understood the termite-eaten American financial system. When the termite-eaten American financial system, which was based on consumption and printing of notes, collapsed, then the world realized that that real economy cannot be defeated by financial economy. You had only financial economy, financial instruments, financial institutions, financial global architecture, technology backing it, investment models to control the world. China had none of this, and they had only real economic power. America thought with financial economic power, you can control the real economy. That collapsed in 2008. And if you see, the greatest advance of China was after 2008. Till 2008, China had a measurable growth, good growth, measurable growth, but not dominant growth. As America weakened the real economic power in the hands of China, with the multinational companies hovering around America, they were able to use the real economic power over financial economic power. So these two incidents, 2001, the World Trade Center attack, and the 2008 financial meltdown, weakened the West. And in this period, the US virtually became a fan of China. The US presidents began praising China and almost conceding that Sino-American partnership is necessary for not only America but for the world. The stature of China grew, and with the result, Trumpism rose. Trumpism is the rise of a political model which was against America in favor of America. This is important thing. Just as pseudo-secularism in India created the Ayodhya movement and the Hindu movement as a reaction, because the nationalists were let down by the secular order. In America, the internationalist liberal order let down America, and that is what gave rise to Trumpism. Now everybody agrees that Trumpism will last beyond Trump, because much of what Trump is saying is acceptable to the Democrats also, and the Democrats are party to moving resolutions in the Congress to withdraw from WTO. So Trump may go, may or may not go, but when he goes, Trumpism will last. It is because the imbalance that was created by America from 1970s, more from 1990s, even more from 2008, is weighing down on America so much that unless America shakes off this and rebuilds itself, it is not that American leadership will go. Will America be what it is? That will also be a question. So how it all unfolded? In 2016, the European Union files a case that China is not a market economy. Will you believe this? They were made part of the WTO in 2001. And in 2016, you file an application, no, they are not a market economy. You know what China said? Once we are in the WTO, we are presumed to be a market economy. See the contradiction, see the oxymoronic result. Finally, in 2019, in fact, America threatened the WTO. If the decision goes against us, we will withdraw from WTO. So the WTO was forced to give a decision that China is not a market economy in 2019 December. In fact, it was an interim decision. China did not have the courage to challenge that decision because the order was so powerfully written that China's fate as a market economy is sealed in WTO. Many people have not read this because of the COVID, but we must understand that China's capacity to deal with the WTO is not even 50% of its capacity to deal with the WTO before this decision. In 2017, the US Trade Representative and EU Trade Representative filed applications in the WTO that if China goes on like this, the WTO will become irrelevant and dead. These were the people celebrating that power. So, if China rose, it was the courtesy, it was the carelessness, recklessness, presumptiveness of the Western power. You thought that you could control dictatorships. It is not possible to control dictatorship. Any more than Chinese can control China dictatorship, the world cannot control China dictatorship. A country which has 30 million army is not a country which can be controlled from outside. Anyhow, in 2019, Bernanke writes a report. China is still not a transparent economy. In 2001, you accepted them as a transparent economy. We are not able to understand what is their cost. So, the US made two differences. One, they said US will act in the national interest, whatever is the WTO position, which means WTO is dead. So, he put sanctions on China. This was the pre-COVID world. Pre-COVID world had actually initiated the changes which will take place in the post-COVID world. Pre-COVID world had virtually destroyed the post-COVID, post-Cold War world order, and this we have to understand. And in the post-COVID world, as I see, there will be a broad trend against China. There will be an alliance. And I see it as an alliance of democracies, which I will explain in the course of time as to what it is. Second, this will actually be in favor of India, because if you look at India, if you look at the Western democracies, the liberal democracies of the world put together is just only 14% of the world's population. Only India added, it becomes some 31, 32%. Without India, there cannot be a democratic world. And the West cannot say you are an illiberal democracy, you are less of a democracy, you are a backward class or scheduled caste democracy, you are a forward class democracy. This kind of thing is over, because the Foreign Policy magazine brought out a report in January 2020. India is the silver lining or gold lining of democracies. Mark these words. India is the silver lining or gold line of democracies, and the title of the paper was Democracy and Disorder. It says all over the world in liberal democracies there is disorder. Pendulum is swinging from liberalism not only to illiberalism to almost to dictatorship. And so the world is changing and changing fast. Without factoring all this, what will be India? What will be the world? What will be the role of India in the world? We can never guess. So, to answer some of the questions, I will come later. And it is, there will be total disturbance of global supply chains. Supply chains are the foundation of globalization. It will be over. Nobody is going to source from the cheapest source. Everybody will begin looking at what is the safest source. Safe source will become the model of supply chain and not cheap source. And nobody is going to say, no, that country may be a dirty country, but that will help my economy, because that will destroy our politics. So the politics economics contradiction, the Marxian polity and market economics contradiction, these oxymoronic concepts, that will all get leveled out. And now come to India. As I said, India was never a global player before 1998. It was not a nation at all before 1990. In fact, it was Robert McNamara said in 1978, Indian Economist himself has said that this Hindu rate of growth, it will never grow. I am begging for aid for you. This was the brand of India. till Angus Madison and Paul Byroe came out with the report to say that for 1700 years, India was the leading economic engine of the world. Everybody thought that we were all always a begging nation. It is that which shifted the perception about India, but not in India. It is only in some circles outside India. When I was talking to IIT in 2010, the IIT Bombay was not aware of Angus Madison or Paul Byroe. That is the education system of India, which I told you had externalized our mind. It never made Indians think for India or for themselves or look at the world from Indian perspective. They looked at India from the Western perspective. You know, these are all the huge shifts which was taking place in India from 1980s and 90s. And but for the Ram Janmabhoomi movement and Hindutva movement, there could be no scope for India-centric thinking in the world, in India. It's not just economic. It's a complex, composite, integrated thinking about India and what India should do in the world, how India should deal with the world. These are all very, very important factors about which no thinking was there in India, because our thinking was externalized and externally funded, by externally induced concepts. When we started the Vivekananda International Foundation in Delhi, the first thing was, should we have Vivekananda's name at all? Will it be acceptable? This was the question in our mind in 2005-6. But Mr. Doval said, yes, it has to be Vivekananda's name. And that two verses, two lines from the Upanishad is being recited as the invocation prayer. That used to be a disqualification against Vivekananda International Foundation. But we put one word, that we will not accept any foreign donation. That has made the think tank the most powerful think tank in India, because everyone, including the foreigners, believe that this think tank is not influenced from outside. That is how even foreign nations accept independently thinking nations, independently thinking institutions, independently thinking intellectuals. Our intellectuals, our intellectual thinking, our system, our establishment, our media are carbon copies of the West. How will you get respect if you vomit their idioms, if you speak their concepts? So it is not that when we talk about small scale industries, big industries, investments, you know, these are all subsets of a larger Indian mind, which is being created. We have struggled to create it for 70 years against an establishment which was supposed to do it. The establishment let us down. The government let us down. The polity let us down. And so now, China from 1995, its stability ensured a huge advantage for multinational firms. They didn't go there only because of labor laws. They also went there because of stability. You had rickety coalitions from 1989 to 2014. Whether the government will be there tomorrow or not, nobody will deal with you. Nobody will invest. Nobody will come and trade with you. Nobody will come and source, because they don't know what will happen. And India is such a diverse country. If you put India on the one side, the rest of the world on the other, you have more diversity in India than the rest of the world put together. Who will invest in India? Whether this will remain one country, this is always a question in the mind of the Indian intellectuals and as a reflection in the Western intellectuals. And so till 2014, India never delivered a message to the world that our democratic order can elect a stable government and a stable leader. These are all big changes. If we are occupying a position today, atom bomb played a very important role. Atalji played a very important role. The people of India played a great role by electing a government with absolute majority in 2014. How many economists factor this in? This is very important. And so India being a pushover, post-Pokhran became a global player. 2014, it became a global strategic partner. Now post-COVID, it will become a shaper and maker of the post-COVID world order. Whatever be the world order, it cannot have a sustainable basis without India's participation and contribution. What are we going to contribute? On that we have to work. The time has come for the world to look at. The Foreign Policy Institute says that India is a silver lining and golden lining in democracy. Our democracy is very different. It's not individualist democracy. India, I will first deal with India versus China. India is not the same as in 1962 for China. China is also not the same as it is against India, because today if Chinese leadership carries on a massive campaign against India, it is not that the Chinese people will believe it. Understand this. So China will have internal complications also in dealing with India, because we are a transparent nation. But in China, they cannot even say how many soldiers have been killed. How they will trust the state? They are also people. And they have enjoyed economic freedom for the last 30 years. They need political freedom. Today, there is a conflict between the PLA and the Chinese government. You know, many of you may not remember, Xi came to India in 2014 on his own invitation. He phoned to the Prime Minister. I was present. And he said, I want to come to India. I should be the first person to come to India. And he wanted to have a Buddhist circuit visit. And he wanted to sign a no-war pact. He wanted to sign a defense pact on the lines of Russia with China, with India. But on the 17th September, when he landed in India, on 18th, when all these things were to be discussed, PLA invaded Ladakh like it did today. So the next 2 days, the two prime ministers were only discussing how to prevent the border clashes and not to forge alliance. This is how PLA destroyed the Indo-Chinese relationship, which was to evolve by that visit. You must understand, in a dictatorship, not one person's mind counts, word counts. It is a collegium of people. They control the decision making, and no one knows how China will move in the world. Many people say it is not dependable. It is because of the dictatorship that China cannot decide which way to go. A democracy can do it. That is the advantage. All must be absolute dictatorship, and there should be nothing called party or anything. So China's strategy today is to condition the mind of India. We should always be worried about what China will do in Bhutan, here, there, so that your efforts are defocused. You are not able to play your role in India or outside. It's not that China is going to invade India, but it will engage India, not on the table, but at the border. We must understand that this is going to be a factor, how our thinking institutions, intellectuals deal with this is going to be very important. If somebody says, the border of India has lost, and the newspapers are going to say they are going to only weaken India. So this is going to be an important factor. China will always force a conflict with India. I mean, the psychology of a conflict with India to control the Indian mind. Now, suddenly the Prime Minister came out with the idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Do you mean to say that he came out with it just like that? He foresaw that the world is shifting from, every country is shifting from world-centric thinking to nationalist thinking. When Trump said it is nationalism which will prevail over globalism, he had already indicated. In fact, in America, nobody has questioned this particular aspect of Trump, because that was the need of America. And whole world will move towards nation-centric thinking. Globalization will become global trade, which it was always. The idea of globalization, that there will be a world sans nations, that will be a world which will erode the national mind, national sentiments, national feelings, national identity, which was fostered and promoted and imposed on the world in 1990s, is not going to be there anymore. That's over. That's why the Prime Minister declared it. It is not that he told this today. If you read the Niti document dated 2nd January 2015, the Prime Minister personally had seen the draft, and he said that we cannot transplant any model from outside, into India. We need an economic model which works in and for India. 2015. And he further said it has to be a Bharatiya model of development. This was the mandate he gave to Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog may not have performed its work, but the Prime Minister was clear in his mind that you have to, he said, this is the model towards which this institution will have to move. Niti Aayog may not have carried forward the agenda. Unfortunately, many intellectuals also missed this point, and so the Prime Minister at an appropriate time in the proper context has come out with the declaration, it should be Atmanirbhar Bharat. Don't think that this thought came just like that. In 2005, the G20 nations declared that one-size-fits-all model won't work in the world. This was the declaration by G20 nations, not by Swadeshi Jagaran Manch. So the G20 nations leadership said, hereafter, this one-size-fits-all model won't work. You know what the United Nations said in 1951? If underdeveloped nations will have to develop, they will have to develop their philosophy, their way of life, their culture, their sociology. Otherwise, they will remain undeveloped. They wanted a homogeneous world, one-size-fits-all model, not only in economics, but in sociology, in politics, in religion, everywhere. That was reversed once the WTO attack took place. It was admitted in 2005 to G20. In 2008, the World Bank used these very words. It is very hard for us to believe and say that one-size-fits-all model won't work. Every country will have to work according to its own culture and value systems and all that. And in 2010, 2013, the United Nations General Assembly discussed this matter and said that this one-size-fits-all model, you only said it in 1951. They said it won't work, every country will have to work out its own model. No echo in India. Because we never had an India-centric thinking. Even these news items did not appear in India. So you must understand that it is the post-COVID world. It is the changing America. It is the challenge from China. It is the rising India, which is making us think about India. Otherwise, we won't be thinking about India even today, just as we did not think of an army till China occupied us. So we are a reactive civilization, and we have been turned into a reactive civilization. From being a top contributor to the world in the 17th and 18th century, as the Western scholars believe, we became a consumer and importer of thoughts because of our own faults. Colonial education could produce a Vivekananda, Aurobindo, and Mahatma Gandhi. Independent India's education system could not produce one. Do we understand this? So we need some kind of a lateral effect. Otherwise, JNU is not going to allow it. You need a lateral intervention to do all this. With this, how the world will look at India, as I said, the Foreign Policy Institute has already said India is the only stable silver lining and golden lining of democracy. These are all not ordinary words. They were the ones who were abusing us. You were in illiberal democracy. World perception has changed. India's perception about itself also has to change. IDEA, which is probably the most celebrated think tank of all the governments put together in America, in Sweden, they have come out with a report that Western liberal democracies are crashing from 95% voter participation to almost 60% voter participation. And more than that, there is the youth participation is becoming less than 45%. The freedom and independence you have given to them, even over their families, is now making them so selfish. They don't feel they have to perform even the basic function of voting in a democracy, liberal democracy that has given them all this freedom. And minorities are going nowhere. Only the minority participation is 40% in Western democracies. See India. Our voting percentage has peaked in the last election, almost 69%. And not only that, 75% of the Muslims vote in the elections. and 65% of the scheduled caste vote in the election. It is the forward caste and educated people who vote less in India. In the Western countries, it is the upper segment, higher income group. These are all there in idea. We have to understand what kind of democracy we have. It is a bottom spread democracy, firm democracy, strong democracy. There the democracy is top-down democracy. It is owned by people here. Do we project our democracy like that? So it's a very major question for us. All this has been highlighted. If possible, if all of you happen to get the Random Thoughts document which is being released by the Vivekananda International Foundation, it contains all this data. So in the economic field, this is going to decide India's position in the world. We have to leverage on our democracy. We have invested heavily in democracy. We have paid economic costs, social costs. We have paid political costs to build this democracy. It's not easy. A dictatorship in India would have performed far better. Whether it would have performed well in India or not, it would have performed outside. But democracy is what would sustain India. Even today, China is not a sustainable country. It can explode or implode. So we have this kind of, overarching helicopter view is necessary to understand even what will or should happen on the ground. Now coming to the Indian economy, broken supply chains in the world from cheap sources to safe sources is going to be a very, very important factor for India to play its global role. Instead of multilateral arrangements, it is plurilateral arrangements and bilateral arrangements which will play a significant role. Japan and India will prefer to work together. Then Japan, India, Korea. Because Japan may find India is culturally more compatible, safer to deal. Economic cost we will bear. This is the kind, because once global competition is gone, nobody is going to look at what is globally what is going to be my cost. So there will be tariff falls. There is a good economist, I think he must be studied. His name is Eric Reinert. Eric Reinert was the man who protested against globalization and said globalization will destroy local manufacturing. Local manufacturing is necessary. There has to be tariff walls, and each country will have to promote its manufacturing. And he has been carrying on this campaign, and he has become more followed after the 2008 meltdown. And so I believe that Reinert economic model of promoting manufacturing and jobs, which has been virtually adopted by Trump, is what the Prime Minister of India has adopted. These are all changes which will happen in 15 days. After COVID, many things will happen. And the kind of imports that we are making, junk imports that we are making from China, because of the wrong calculations we made about our relationship with China, because of the money that is coming from stock exchange, which enabled us to spend on imports, because the money that was coming, the government of India did not know how to invest. So they began importing. And I have written about it, a decade of economic destruction, how it happened. The capital goods import in India in 10 years from 2004 to 2014 was $690 billion, whereas the oil imports were only $600 billion. So we destroyed our economy. Our trade deficit with China was $175 billion in 7 years. This is 3 times the China's defense budget. So we cooked up our economy. We have to come out of all this. Our banking system is under stress. And now to address these aspects, specifically the 3 questions that I am coming as the last. The first question is investments and local industry. You see, the very concept of money, according to me, is going to change. So far, our money creation was dependent on how much dollar we were getting into India. And printed dollars in America, not saved dollars or generated dollars or production dollars, it is printed dollars that decided how much currency we can print. This kind of useless economy, this kind of one of the most superficial way of understanding what is money, that is bound to change. And the whole world is going to change. The other day I read an article in Bloomberg that once it was thought that deficit financing is wrong, today deficit financing is right. These are situations change, but our mindset has to change. And I don't think India money will become a product of how we see our future. Once this change occurs, we will not have any problem about money. So far as the how Dr. Tyagi mentioned, it's about 8 lakh crores which is lying in the Reserve Bank. The figure is understated. Actually, 12 lakh crores is lying. Deposits 4 lakh crores and reverse repo 8 lakh crores. 12 lakh crores is the amount of money that is of the banks which are lying. The banks are not lending money because the borrowers have been disqualified by Reserve Bank's NPA rules. You cannot create borrowers overnight. Raghuram Rajan has destroyed 60% of the borrowers in India, put them beyond qualification. And unless the qualification rule is changed, the borrowers cannot be, they want money, the bank cannot lend to them. That is why the banks over-lent and put the economy in trouble. They are under-lending and will put the economy in trouble now. So this cannot last, this has to change, and the system cannot tolerate it. And as we are reactive people, we are not proactive people, we are not proactive thinkers, we only think of when the crisis comes, we think. And so I think this solution will come like this. Actually, no government will be able to tolerate this. I believe that even the Reserve Bank will have to see reason, and they cannot be making rules like the bureaucrats, and they have to think like economic thinkers, and I think that change will come. Then we talked about the largest democracy having the largest poor population. You know, poverty in India is not individualistic. We think of India as an individualistic country. It's not an individualistic country. You know, there was a survey, what is this? Below poverty line families were provided identity in Uttar Pradesh. So in each house, somebody pasted, the government pasted BPL. The people protested. They were poor, but don't declare us as poor. It's important because in a community, nobody wants to be declared as poor because there is a relationship. Each person's help. A family stands together. We are applying the rules of individuals. I am not saying deciding there is no relative individual poverty in India. There is a relative group poverty. So that is why we need to have proactive approach to solve groups problems. That's why reservation is needed. That is why targeted spending is needed in India. This is not how the Indian economists think. We have to think like this. And I think once our capacity to generate money, to generate wealth, that goes up, these are things which can be addressed. You know, China lifted 160 million people above the poverty line through 28 million town and village enterprises. You know, we have 16 million small and micro businesses in India, which Mudra is funding. If only we can do targeted spending and focused policies, clustering them, they can lift 250 to 300 million people above poverty line. Not in 15 years, in 5 years. Mudra has proved it. So it is not difficult to lift people out of poverty line. It is not necessary only to spend from the budget. The people are willing to work. The carpenters are willing to work. The masons are willing to work. How many people know that 70% of the plumbers in India come from one place called Kendrapara district in Orissa, and 1 lakh people are outside India? Who created them? It is not the state, it is the society. You ignore the society. Society has enormous potentiality in India, which we have not seen. We only see Indians as a collection of individuals. No, they are communities, they are families, they are regions. They develop skills on that basis, a trust on that basis, share their savings on that basis. This has been studied by World Bank. So my feeling is that we need not have to be, because we had a world which was not looking at us favorably. Today the world is not only looking at us favorably, it looks at us expectantly. So paradigm has changed. So the investment that you have made in democracy is going to give huge returns in future, and that is the important message from the post-COVID world order. And also technology is very important. Technology is important, has been realized by America. It's because technology cannot be saved. When your own people can be bribed by some country to lift technology, laws cannot protect it. You have to share technology with safe nations. This will be the model in future. And we have enough technological brains, competence to absorb technologies. We can work out technological alliances. And we did not even have a proper diplomatic relationship with Taiwan. Today we have upgraded our relationship. Taiwan is the source of nanotechnology. So every country will have to choose its technological partner, and technology will not be governed by global order because WTO is gone. So the technology roadmap for India will be founded on strategic relationship, and India need not have to worry about it because it has enough competence. India is not one of those pushovers in technology, can absorb technology, can handle technology. So my feeling is that the world is now moving in such a way that there will be a transformation from financial economy to real economy, which is very good because the financial economy was disturbing India. Now, the real economy will dominate and nationalism will dominate over globalism. And so India-centric thinking will evolve, and there will be a democratic focus to the world in which India will play a very important role. The next 20 years, India is not only India's century, it will be India's century with the world. We have never had our relationship with the world properly defined because the world was not with us. Today, the world is with you. You can define a relationship on our terms. India will become the most transparent factory. This is where Eric Reinert theory is important. I would like Bharat Niti to hold a seminar based on Eric Reinert's writings, which are very, very relevant for the world and particularly India. Thank you very much for listening to me patiently for a long time, as much as 1 hour and 10 minutes. Thank you very much.